All right, I think I'm live, but can everyone hear me? Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. Hey everyone, I hope you're well. If you can't hear me or if I need to change the volume, let me know. But it's good to be back. So a tremendous thank you to Heather for letting me return another time. And per her suggestions, I am wearing a band t-shirt. This is the band ASG, and I thought it would be appropriate since I went to go see them the night before I had my ruptured brain aneurysm. They were playing in DC along with a band called Lopan. So if you get the chance, I would recommend checking out both bands. They are quite good. But today I thought I would read from an essay that I wrote, part of which will be appearing in a magazine called Hope, which is a traumatic brain injury magazine that was coming out in the fall. And then after that, I thought I'd read a short story that I had written, and then I can answer any questions if anyone has any. But I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining me. So here we go. So this essay is entitled Love in the Time of Coronavirus, and then the subtitle is Online Dating Before the Virus, a Contemplation of Taking Hallucinogens and the Search for Toilet Paper. So before I begin, I'm reminded of a quotation by George Costanza after he'd shared some details about his life with board members when he was looking for a new apartment. He said, "These stories have not been embellished because they need no embellishment. They are simply, horrifyingly, the story of my life as a short, stocky, slow-witted bald man." Of course, I feel like there are a lot of differences twixt me and George Costanza, but I know where he's coming from in terms of the embellishment aspect. So when I was in graduate school, I wrote a short story entitled The Solitude of Fortress. It was about how Superman discovers that his ex-girlfriend is dating Bizarro Superman. And there had been a segment of the story I cut in which I discussed the movie Fortress, starring Christopher Lambert. Kurtwood Smith from the film RoboCop, and later That 70s Show, he played Red, was in it, as well as Vernon Wells, who played the Mohawk-having villain Wes in the Mad Max The Road Warrior, as well as the Lord General in Weird Science, and Bennett in Commando. The title of my story had been a play on words on Superman's Fortress of Solitude, but it was also a metaphor. There are very few people in the world who are intimate with the details of the film Fortress. It can be a lonely existence. When I had my ruptured brain aneurysm, aside from a lengthy physical and emotional recovery, I also needed to figure out how I would spend my time. The goals I had had before the aneurysm had changed. As I considered various ways to stay engaged, I thought perhaps if I started dating again, that might help. What follows are messages with two people from an online dating site. In the first one, I asked her, "What kind of music does your friend's band play?" She wrote back, "It's a husband-wife duo, very talented and genuinely lovely people. They play guitars and sing covers of pop rock from early 2000s to today. The husband does a mean rendition of Frozen, LOL." I wrote, "Nice, I play the guitar a little, and sometimes I play some songs from that same catalog." She wrote, "Ha, that's cool. They play kids' gigs, so they have it in their repertoire. We request it at adult gigs as a joke. Everyone gets into it." I wrote, "I'd play in class sometimes if I felt I was losing the students' attention. Mostly it would be songs from the 90s, though occasionally from the 2000s. Unfortunately, I didn't know any songs from the Frozen catalog because that would have probably killed." I never heard back. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing remains to be seen. For the second message, her profile read that she was a trade economist. So I wrote, "The only experience I have with trade policy is being able to recite most of Ben Stein's Hawkeye smoothie tariff speech from the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I used it as an example of different teaching methods." She wrote, "Haha, I clearly need to watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off again. I had no idea it had a trade policy lecture in it." So I wrote, "That was supposed to read Hawley Smoot Tariff. I can only imagine what the Hawkeye Smoothie Tariff would be. Hey, did you hear about the embargo on Berry Blast?" She wrote, "At the risk of sounding extremely dorky, there are retaliatory tariffs on over $1 billion of U.S. fruit exports. Smoothie tariffs are real." I wrote, "It's all good. Smoothie King had better watch out. Maybe if Ben Stein had been talking about smoothie tariffs, the students would have been paying attention." She wrote, "Way more relevant. Actually, I'm not sure how many smoothies were around in the 80s. Do you teach teachers?" And I wrote, "I'm guessing not too many. For the last few years, I've taught writing and English classes for middle and high school students with learning disabilities. Before that, I taught college students in Macau and Hong Kong. For both groups, I would compare my teaching methods to Ben Stein's and show them the clip. Usually, they would agree mine were more enjoyable. This year, I've been substitute teaching and I'm about to start tutoring. What does work entail for you?" 3 days went by before she replied. "Sorry," she wrote, "I thought I responded to your last text. My work entails more spreadsheets than 80s movies, although the lawyer I worked with on the Chinese tariffs did use a theoretical company named Initech as an example of one of our China 301 notices." For those of you out there who aren't familiar, Initech is the name of the fictional computer company in the film Office Space. So I wrote, "It's all good. I thought maybe my warning to Smoothie King may have hit a nerve. I figured the balance at work would skew more toward spreadsheets, but I always appreciate a good Office Space reference. I hope you're having a nice weekend so far." The conversation continued, and we made plans to meet for a drink. The game plan going into the date was to be subtle with revealing certain aspects, like the ruptured brain aneurysm. Of course, within the first half an hour, I had already told her about the aneurysm, my not enjoying teaching as much as I used to, not having a car, as well as not drinking. Regardless, I texted her a few days after our date, and I never got a reply. It's probably for the best. As the months dragged on, I continued to adjust, made plans to volunteer with various organizations, and even decided to revisit the dating world. I had also rediscovered my desire to teach, not necessarily to provide instruction about what a gerund was, but to help people feel less alone. Also, I missed going off on tangents about things which have nothing to do with the lesson, like, for example, a mondegreen. That's when you mishear song lyrics. So now you'll get a chance to experience my teaching methods because I'm going to go off on a tangent. I don't know why, but I had been thinking about mondegreen recently. Especially, I remembered seeing a movie titled Explorers with a young River Phoenix and Ethan Hawke. I saw the movie when I was 6, and there's a line in the film when Ethan Hawke says to a bully, "Elephantitis is when something gets bloated and ugly like your ass." I thought he had said something along the line of, "Shove elephantites up your ass." You can imagine how confused I was at the age of 6. What were elephantites? Wait, where was I? Oh, that's right, making people feel less alone. More recently, I listened to a podcast that discussed theories Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche had on the role mythology played in cultivating spiritual development and helping to provide comfort with the aforementioned existential question. According to the show, one of the reasons people experience angst is due to the rise of technology eclipsing the role of mythology in our culture. Among other things, myths are narratives which transmit modes of behavior, patterns of action, and ways of experiencing the world that promote healthy psychological development and a meaningful life. That's from the Academy of Ideas podcast. During the quarantine, the question of purpose reappeared. It's difficult for me to have emotional connections, and the analogy I think of is someone at dinner who is not hungry and has no taste buds. They know they must eat, but it's also difficult to be motivated to do so. Similarly, I still have balance and vision issues. So, at almost the 2-year mark, after trying acupuncture and reading different Buddhist, Stoic, and other philosophical texts, one of the books I read was The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. The book chronicles his experience experimenting with peyote. Now, I've avoided hallucinogens my entire life due to anxiety issues. However, there seemed to be something romantic about exploring this realm. I figured dabbling in pharmaceuticals such as these might be worthwhile. I spoke with my consigliere, Mr. Mxyzptlk, named after the comic book imp who harasses Superman. He advised me to immediately participate in this scheme. However, my only problem, as he saw it, was where to acquire peyote. He raised a good point. I began to do some research and discovered the United States passed a law allowing the Native American Church to incorporate the use of peyote in their religious practices. Upon doing further research, unfortunately, I discovered there were no Native American churches near where I live. So, back to square one. Although, I'm hoping if the doors of perception stay closed, perhaps someone will open a window. I thought I could order peyote online, and I found a website for a distributor located in Holland. Then, of course, I imagined unwittingly participating in a sting operation in which a joint task force of DEA and FBI agents initiate a 2-pronged attack on my home early in the morning. As the zip ties are cinched tight around my wrists and ankles, I can kiss due process goodbye as I'm hauled off to a black site where, in the words of Maynard from the film Charlie Varick, they will go to work on me with a pair of pliers and a blowtorch. Therefore, I will probably avoid indulging in the fantasy of hallucinogens. However, I will have to address the impending toilet paper issue as I'm down to my last roll. While the Whole Foods on the next block still had items on the shelves, they had been successfully cleaned out of toilet paper. So had the CVS across the street. As someone who lives alone, it didn't matter if I only bought a single roll at a time. Now, however, I was on my last roll. I hoped, like the proverbial Hanukkah oil of lore, my toilet paper would last longer than I had anticipated. I had the idea to have my mother ship me some as a last resort. I also had the idea of somehow restructuring the chemical makeup of coffee filters so they could be used as a substitute. I began having delusions of grandeur in which I would be awarded the Nobel Prize for Science. For discovering coffee filters can be flushed. If you dissolve 2 Advil capsules in the bowl, it won't harm the plumbing or septic tank. Our nations are eternally grateful. This would be said by a bearded Swedish man just before he presented me with the plaque and the $1 million check. And to think, this daydream wasn't brought on by an effect of ingesting hallucinogens. Just FYI, I ended up getting toilet paper before there was a problem and I could test my theory. All right, so thank you. That was a version of an essay that will appear in Hope magazine in the fall. This is titled Love in the Time of Coronavirus. That one is titled Elvis Played the Cow Palace. So if you get the chance to pick up Hope magazine when it comes out in the fall, you'll see the differences. And I thought I would read a short story I had written, which is unfortunately not available online, although it is available in print. If you were to get a magazine called Furtive Dalliance, which I think you can get on Amazon, but I thought I would share it with you now. So this is called Informal Fallacy, and this was partially influenced by my adventures in the online dating realm. So here we go. And again, please stop me if I am moving too fast or if I need to raise the volume or anything. But hold on, let me just double check and make sure. Okay, there we go. Cool. All right, so informal fallacy. There are 4 possible reasons why she hasn't returned the online dating message which was sent 1 day, 6 hours, and 38 minutes ago. A, she's not interested. B, she's already seeing someone and hasn't deleted her account. C, She is still working and hasn't checked her dating profile. Maybe she's guarding someone in witness protection. It says she works in government. D. She's hiding in her closet while a fully grown adult male orangutan destroys her living room. The beast had been stolen from a zoo by some drunk stockbrokers, one of whom, amid his beer-soaked haze, thought he could beat an orangutan in a fight. Still clothed in work attire, they managed to liberate the primate from his cage. Incited to a riotous rage from their mocking and an overwhelming sense of entitlement, he threw them around like popcorn and escaped into the night. Frightened and driven by separation anxiety, he found solace in the apartment. Her arrival sent him into a fury, and now she cowers for her life, unable to get to the computer at the other end of the apartment to respond. His wielding of a straight razor doesn't make things any easier. On second thought, this seems implausible. Plus, Edgar Allan Poe already mined this territory. Instead, she's taken captive by H.G. Wells' Morlocks for mating purposes. An alternate theory sees her free fall through some Ballardian construct. A fissure caused by shifting tectonic plates opened, and she was cast into the abyss beneath her apartment. Disoriented and suffering from heat stroke and dehydration, she navigates through the stalactites towards the epicenter of some forgotten realm and discovers a tribe of creatures similar to the Morlocks of H.G. Wells' Time Machine. She's taken captive and brought before the king, who decrees she will become one of his concubines. She recoils at his touch, while those around them begin performing a ritualistic mating dance meant to induce ovulation in the female species. This seems most plausible. Accepting this reason, he begins scrolling through the list of other potential dates now staring back at him from the computer screen. He shuts his eyes and imagines each of them fading into obscurity, save for the one he's ordained to be with. She stands off in the distance. Faceless, she is an apparition. She is the perfect amalgam of tolerance, acceptance, and unconditional love. The repeated failures to find her has twisted his idealism into cynicism. He remembers the days when Pandora's Box wasn't simply the name of a pornographic film starring Craven Double D and Hugh Jackman. He shuts off the computer and crawls into bed, knowing underneath the surface of the earth, somewhere, the Morlocks are having their way with her. Options are to either find Pandora's Box, both the Greek mythological relic capable of hope and Mr. Ackman's finest work according to the Adult Video Network, or rescue her from the Morlocks. The man crawls under his bed, through the newly formed fissure in the sedimentary crust, and descends. He's greeted by music. The first notes are muted, as if listening to them underwater. Then the familiar riff, a tuning fork's blast, pushes him back like a strong wind. The notes are from Iron Butterfly's Inagata Davida on repeat. The situation strikes the man as similar to the climax of the film Manhunter, in which Francis Dolarhyde, the villain, blasts the song on 8-track while taking another sense, hearing, away from his blind victim. Also, Dante's Inferno and having to listen to Inagata Davida for eternity would be his private level of hell. His head pulsates along with the rhythms, and blood begins to flow from his ears. The man screams and attempts to walk, but his balance is skewed. He ambles along like a wounded drunk. The man tears his shirt to plug his ears. He's passed through the first threshold of the decibel level, but the repetitiveness at 17 minutes might indeed drive him beyond the limits, as it had Noriega. In Operation Nifty Package, the United States used psychological warfare to initiate the surrender of Manuel Noriega. They played I Fought the Law by The Clash, You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC, Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses, and Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die by Jethro Tull. This was a prime opportunity to play Panama by Van Halen. Also, why not Metallica? The song One would have been a perfect, with lyrics like, Darkness imprisoning me, all that I see, absolute horror. This is the second time Jethro Tull was selected instead of them. Jethro Tull won the inaugural award for Best Hard Rock Metal Performance for their album Crest of a Knave in 1988. This beat And Justice for All by Metallica, Nothing Shocking by Jane's Addiction, Blow Up Your Video by AC/DC, and Cold Metal by Iggy Pop. Jethro Tull, Metal to Make Dictators Surrender. If you don't mind for a second, I'm just going to pause to take a drink. Thank you. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, Jethro Tull, Metal to Make Dictators Surrender. The man passes by horrific depictions drawn on the cavern walls. He conjures up ideas these rooms must dictate the precept of the elder Morlock gods. Soon, the rhythmic chanting of the Morlocks eclipses the sound of dissonant rock. Remaining hidden from sight, the man glances into the huge chamber. She's been stripped of her clothes and fitted with some ceremonial garb. High priestesses are reciting incantations while the rest of the Morlocks daven. The man attempts to summon the bravery but cannot. He realizes his strength resides within the illusions. He has no courage of his own. Ready to give up and allow for the madness to fully consume him, he's distracted by the glint of light shining off metal. Crawling on all fours, he risks being seen, but makes it to the other side of the room, a trophy room of sorts. Feeling the first pang of possibility, he begins scouring the poorly lit antechamber through discarded weapons, clothing, and armor from vanquished and fallen warriors, those who'd attempted the same perilous journey and failed. Sifting through the rubble, he casts aside axes, knives, guns, until he sees it, a blood-red casing of a cane sword. He picks it up and removes the sheath, feeling the tang of the blade, cutting the air with swift rotations. The man settled on this weapon due to his fascination with Zatoichi the Blind Samurai. He casts aside the sheath and walks into the chamber with a determined gait. Each sword strike more precise. Each snicker-snack of the blade instills within him a sense of pride. A Morlock's severed head skips across the floor like a knuckleball, getting some air when it hits a rock, finally coming to a halt at the far side of the room. The Morlocks attempt to organize, but caught up in the bloodlust of the previous event, have trouble controlling their pheromones. The room is filled with sweet ambrosia, and some begin copulating amidst the chaos. The man skewers three together like a shish kebab. Covered in fetid fluids, wearing a war face of pure enmity, the man pauses to gain his breath, deep heaving chest spasms, and sticks the end of the blade into the ground. In a brief pause, the man curses himself for not having better cardiovascular. The Morlocks have time to reconvene. He summons the energy for a berserker rage, and after putting two more down, clears a path to her. Her features never quite come into focus, distorted just to the point where he can almost tell what she looks like. He steadies himself and in one motion slices the bindings, freeing her from captivity. Upon being freed, she replicates into 6 mirror images. It turns out the Morlocks are actually the Thing from the film The Thing. All he can do is laugh, long and drawn out, surrounded by doppelgangers, each perfect in their construction. They approach. He acts, swinging the sword, watching them fall, hearing the piercing cries. He continues until only one is left standing. "What now?" she says, keeping her eyes on the sword the whole time. He tosses it. She smiles, one of relief, perhaps delight, and comes closer. "Why don't we wait here for a little while and see what happens?" he says. Spoiler alert. The film The Thing ends with this line, and it is implied both of the remaining characters, Keith David and Kurt Russell, will either die or one of them is the Thing. This is the same way the man feels about online dating, the paradoxical and futile nature of it. However, if he can find Pandora's box. All right, thank you. So that was Informal Fallacy, which you can find on Amazon, and you can find pretty much all of my work on at my website, asdavie.wordpress.org, and you can, I think my bio is probably available in the group, but that's all that I had planned for today in terms of the things I was going to read. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them. It may take a moment as you write them because it's not posting live. But if there are no questions, then I think that's going to do it. It'll be a short one today. But I wanted to thank all of you for watching, and especially Heather for putting this group together. And I look forward to hopefully returning a third time, perhaps, depending on what happens. But we have some wonderful, there are wonderful groups, mostly musicians, who are slated to perform over the next few weeks. I believe we have Ghost Hello next weekend, followed by K Proudy and Atomic Cavemen and Harshmellow. So if you get the chance, check the schedule. But all of these bands are going to be live streaming performances, I believe, and definitely worth your time. But thank you so much for listening to me wax philosophical about my exploits, both fictional and non-fictional. And thank you. I am obsessed with Morlocks. Although it's funny because, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to tangent again, which I will for about a minute. But that fiction story that I wrote was actually based on another interaction I had online dating, where I suggested that one of the reasons, because I hadn't heard from her in about a week, so I wrote back with a list of possible reasons why I hadn't heard back from her, including things like, that she was busy at work. I did suggest that the Morlocks or the orangutan was a possible reason. And we did actually go out to meet for a date. This was before the aneurysm. And it was interesting because at the time I told my brother that I had replied by saying that one of the reasons she hadn't got back to me was because of an orangutan keeping her trapped in a room. And my brother said, "You realize you're giving her the full dose of you right off the bat." And I told him that, when you pass 40, there's really no time to waste. So rather than sort of be subtle, as you can all probably tell, I haven't really been subtle, nor have I really been successful in the online dating realm. But it's really difficult. So for those of you out there who have somebody who you are in a relationship with, or are really good friends with, or whatever it is, be thankful of that. It's interesting because things have certainly changed since the aneurysm. Like I feel differently about the where on my list of priorities having a relationship with someone would factor. It's not nearly as high as it used to be. But again, I appreciate your indulging me and letting me take a trip down memory lane and revisit some of my past experiences, both, as I said, fictional and non-fictional. And if you'd like to continue checking out any more of my work, I have a short story called Behold the Pale Horse, which was just released a couple of days ago. And I have a short story coming out, which are about a fictional band that's sort of been influenced by everybody that I've been fortunate enough to meet within the last few months, including Duncan and the guys in Grave Next Door, and a bunch of other bands who I've featured on A Fistful of Faithful. But the short story is sort of minutes from a band's meeting in which they have discussed, being sued by another band who has the same name, and various other things. But I think that's probably going to do it for today. So I know I've said that before. Again, you're getting insight into my what teaching was like. So right now there were probably kids in the back of the class going, "Ask him another movie question, ask him another movie question." And they would. And I would, of course, indulge them because I can't help it. But thank you again. So I promise, I know I keep threatening to go, but now I think I probably finally will. So thank you very much again for watching. And I appreciate the comments and I look forward to being back again. So thank you very much.